Hey, how's it going, folks? Today I wanted to talk about the upcoming Halloween game and some of the sort of either, positivity, negativity surrounding it. There's a lot of media previews out there. There's a lot of sort of hesitation among the Dead by Daylight community or the old, Friday the 13th community, the Texas players and things like that. And I wanted to talk about the reasons that I'm hyped for Halloween the game. Um, I've written about Friday the 13th, Killer Clowns, Texas Chainsaw Massacre for Fangoria Magazine, Variety, RogerEbert.com. I interviewed one of the two co-founders of Gun Media on my podcast a couple years back when Texas was about to hit. Um, I interviewed like a ton of people who worked on Friday the 13th, the game, for an oral history for Fango around the time of like Halloween 2018. Yeah, like on Halloween 2018, I was like talking on the phone to Kane Hodder about his work on the game, put together this oral history. Um, Friday the 13th, the game is kind of the title that made me fall in love with horror games. It's still, for my money, the most fun that genre has ever been, the sort of asymmetrical horror formula. And so I guess the number one reason of 10, that I'm excited for Halloween, besides the license, this is the first time that we're seeing Ilphonic as the developer and Gun Interactive as the publisher back together, after a few years kind of going their separate ways, working on like similar projects with other partners and doing some really cool stuff. I had my fun with Texas. I had my fun with Killer Clowns. I think a lot of folks would say that they were a match made in heaven. When Friday was sort of healthy and going good, sort of before um, the curse of the ongoing Horror Inc. versus Miller litigation kind of doomed it. I'm excited to see, how these two companies that have sort of grown and matured and gone through some hardships. I mean, the whole games industry has had a really rough few years. Okay, that's no secret. I think Ilphonics had layoffs. I think Gun is a small company that, really knows their stuff. Um, I think it could be a really interesting to see those two back together. I also, number 2, I think Michael Myers fits that Friday the 13th ASIM formula better than a lot of the other licensed IPs out there. I think Killer Clowns is like a very, very kind of niche cult film that, like, it's not Five Nights at Freddy's, it's not Chucky, it's not like this big heavyweight horror IP, okay? It's like one really cool, fun cult film from the 80s that I love. It's a really good movie. Um, but it's hard for that kind of game to compete with the Dead by Daylights of the world, the, sort of seven days to die, like that kind of I think Michael Myers is a is as close as we get to like a one-to-one Jason Voorhees and the counselors, right? You got the sort of the babysitters and the babysitter boyfriends and you have Dr. Loomis as sort of the Tom Matthews, what's his name? Tommy Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis. I almost called him Freddie Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis, the hero who comes in at the 11th hour and helps save the day. I think that you know, um I think the particular fantasy that Friday the 13th delivered and delivered really fucking well for a long time, for that whatever 7 years or 6 years that the game was really alive. I think Michael Myers, Laurie Strode, the other sort of kids on the block, Sam Loomis, like that is a really good fit for that, template that Friday did so well and found, commercial success with, critical success with. Um, I've been writing for and about video games professionally since 2013. I haven't always focused on horror stuff, but the Asym games and Friday and Texas Killer Clowns, like that stuff has always held my interest as when are we going to get back to that sort of golden age of Friday the 13th, the game? And, for a long time I thought, well, I don't think we ever will. But when Halloween was announced, and I had like this weird gut feeling that it was coming because Gunn was a little bit quiet and, um, it made sense. Michael was back in the public consciousness with the whole trilogy of movies, and, um, those generated a lot of buzz, good and bad. I think that the first one from 2018 was a phenomenal legacy sequel. I think the rest of the trilogy could kind of take it or leave it. I thought Ends was really interesting and bold. For the most part, there was like some weird stuff in there, but um, yeah, and I don't know. And Halloween Kills, I hated that movie when it came out. And now I feel like maybe I was a little hard on it because I've seen worse, but um, it made me angry in that way that sometimes nerds get angry when they see a movie and they're like, "Oh, I would have done it this totally other different way." But um, okay, reason number three that I'm very excited for Halloween the game. Um, Dead by Daylight doesn't immerse me into that fantasy that I'm talking about with Friday and the way that it's like, okay, we're in the movie, right? We're like these kids or we're Jason or whatever, and we're in the experience of being in that movie and like role playing like the scared young girl searching the drawer for the knives or the car keys. That is really fun with a group of friends who play together regularly and develop sort of a shared politics or etiquette or sense of like what is fun and what is not fun and what's kind of a dick move and what is not. I think if you can get sort of cultivate a friend group to play like private matches or just go into like a party together, um, that's part of what made Friday really special. Um, and I think with something like Dead by Daylight, this sort of like Fortnitification of a horror game, as much fun as that can be. I like DVD. I mean, I like jumping in as Michael Myers, especially, and just going ape shit on some strangers with a knife. That's kind of fun. I think that it looks really cool. I like the sort of cosmic horror, like sacrifices. Like that stuff is cool. Like I think Dead by Daylight is a great game for what they're going for, but it doesn't kind of like put you in the movie, like you want to be in. I mean, maybe you don't want to be in Friday the 13th, or maybe you really don't want to be in Halloween, but it's like it's fun. It's fun to do that on a Friday night with some friends to be, scare each other, piss each other off, or be a hero and save somebody's life, and oh, I got the car running, I fixed it, we're getting out of here, and like, oh, you get like this big heroic moment, you rally together, and you and so can get out on the boat or whatever. Um, yeah, I think a lot of horror games struggle to achieve that kind of high of like, oh, I got these things lined up. Um, and just like that sense of like working together. I think, and that's the other side of the coin being the killers, right? I think number four, the reason that I think Michael and Ilphonic and Gunn is like a good combination of design and philosophy and creative potential for this type of game is when you have a squad of killers like the killer clowns from outer space or the Texas, is it Sawyer, not the Sawyer family, is it, oh god, is it the Savage family, what, Slaughter family, the Slaughter family, oh, it's been a while, the Slaughter family of killers in Texas, um, they like you have multiples, they have various unique abilities. Like, so balancing that is infinitely harder than, say, like Jason or Michael with this very specific, finely tuned player package. That's like, okay, so now we only have to really tune um, the players, the survivors, and how to are they able to survive? Are they able to fight back or not? And um yeah, I know. I mean, I this is something that I haven't talked with the devs about in a long time, but I think that it's always a balancing act with any sort of multiplayer game. It's like you have to listen to what the players are saying about what is happening in these matches more often than not, and it's like a constant tug of war between what the loudest voices are saying and what the data says. And I think if you have, four or five killers or even three killers, and you have this sort of infinite combinations of loadouts and things like that, there's like a lot of complexity there, and it's going to be hard to keep the game balanced and fun for those players who are kind of competitive, and they're not just playing to have like a fun Friday night. They want to win, they want to kill Jason. Like, you have those players. I've been that player at one point in time. Like, you have those players, and the people who put a lot of time into your game are going to care about feeling that it's fair. And I think that if you've got one powerful Jason, one powerful Michael, or the shape, that's gonna be a lot more sort of a good baseline, to launch with, rather than like, oh, the clowns are like totally wimpy, or the Texas, the family in Texas is just way overpowered, or like Dead by Daylight has to like basically, beg the players to play the killer because it's really hard for them to keep up with the survivors getting away and stuff. So, um, reason number 5, I'm hyped for Halloween the game. Halloween is my favorite of the big horror franchises and always has been. I think that there's something pure and elemental about like this silent figure, this stranger, standing there in the dark with a mask and a knife. Okay, that's like terrifying. We understand that, we see that image, the story writes itself immediately. It lives in your imagination forever. The shape, the stranger in the dark, the night he came home. I think that, that's something that is going to resonate with people and scare the shit out of the people who want to be scared. And, um, and the players who are kind of on that more like comedic side, they're going to have a lot of fun trolling Michael. They're going to be, they're going to love the like shit talking Michael part of it, making fun of him, coming up with like things to say that it's funny, rather, to kind of break the tension. And Friday the 13th was a very funny game, whether you're playing with friends, acquaintances, or total strangers online. Like, that game was hilarious. And I think that Halloween kind of lends itself. I mean, like you've got um is it Buster Rhymes, breaking out the like trick or treat, mother effer. You got stuff like that that players are gonna like love to quote and love to joke around with. Yeah, number 6, Dr. Samuel Loomis is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. Yeah, he's like on the edge of sanity. He has this crazy worldview where evil is like this concrete force that exists in the world, like a substance, or he sees Michael as this unkillable animal, and it isn't a man. You let it out of here. Like that kind of shit. He is really fun. I think Donald Pleasance, he put a lot into that performance and gave the role some pathos and humanity, and brought like a heightened sense of danger to a series that could have been a little sillier, and it could have been, like, he sort of showed up, and you have actors working with somebody like that who is in, all these like classic films and British films. And um, I think of like THX 1138, which is like this goofy George Lucas sci-fi thing before Star Wars. But like, I mean, he's been in all kinds of stuff, like some of those old war movies and things, the grandpa cinema, and I think that you get better performances out of people like Jamie Lee Curtis and the other actors in the film. Charles Cyphers, like, if you show up on the set with a Donald Pleasance, everybody's just gonna really, show up for work that day, mentally, spiritually. Um, Reason number 7 that I'm excited for Halloween the game. Halloween doesn't have the same legal minefield to walk that Friday did. Okay, that was like a unique shit show of epic proportions. Stemming from Sean S. Cunningham, the longtime producer of the Friday franchise, the Jason license, being kind of a jerk and kind of like an exploitative businessman who didn't want to, he and it's common. I mean, you look at like any point at any like comic book publisher, okay, and then ask like the writers who had created like Thanos or Rocket Raccoon or Doctor Strange. Ask these creators who created all these like Avengers and X-Men and stories and things like. Ask them how much they got paid to do that. Ask them how much ownership they have over that character or that IP. That's pretty much the situation with Victor Miller in the Friday series. He created all these characters in the original Friday the 13th film, Pamela Voorhees and the Jason story of like the young boy who drowned and all that stuff. And at some point Victor Miller gets up there in years and he asks for a small slice of the pie and like said like, you owe all this success of your IP to me on some level. Like I want, a little something for me and my family. And um it's a sort of messy drama, I don't know. It's that meme of the messy guy who lives for drama. I don't know if you would want to say that it's all Sean Cunningham, but that seems to be kind of the picture that gets painted if you don't have to just look at Victor Miller. You look at all the people who've worked on the Friday the 13th franchise over the years, and he's kind of like a messy, miserly guy who's not always the kindest person to work with, by the sounds of things. So Halloween is not like that. John Carpenter is a guy who likes to get paid when his IP is used, but he's like a chill guy, you know. I don't, he's not like famously litigious in that way that Sean Cunningham has clearly been. And, it's the Halloween franchise is kind of like a package deal. I think it's not divided up into all these like, oh, the mask is owned by this person and the character of Pamela is, created by this person. And like, you can use the Friday the 13th title in this film, but this film, you've got to call it Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, because we don't want to use Friday the 13th anymore because we're going to sell the rights to Jason Voorhees. But, like Friday the 13th is like a messy, messy IP, or it has been historically. And they've kind of like tidied it up in court recently. And so maybe one day we'll get another movie. But going into summer camp, what was it? Summer camp volume 1, and making this sort of like Friday the 13th pastiche would have been like the safer way to do it. But then they had the opportunity to make it Friday the 13th, and it was like it was a minefield, and it was really poisoned from the start in that way. People will blame Gunn or Ilphonic or whoever for ruining the game, abandoning the game, but they were in kind of a legal no-win scenario by making it a Friday the 13th game, especially when in time they did. It was very much at a contentious point in this ongoing, 10-year, I don't know how long it was, but really years and years long legal strife in the courts between, basically the two creators of the series. Um, reason number 8 why I'm excited for Halloween the game. Halloween, like Friday before it, has a mainstream critical mass and a kind of pull in the public consciousness that something like Killer Clowns or Texas Chainsaw just doesn't. Okay. We love those movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is regarded by many as sort of like the Citizen Kane of horror movies. Yeah. For me, it's more probably like Halloween 1 is probably that, but like, the people who say Texas 1 is like the, daddy of horror films, total respect for that opinion. I mean, it's great. Um, those are great films in very different ways, but they're not Jason, Freddy, Michael, Chucky, Five Nights at Freddy's. They're not. Those are the heavy hitters, and your average sort of casual gamer, um, knows right away whether or not they're interested in something called Halloween the game. All right. Okay, Michael Myers the game. They know right away whether or not they're gonna buy and play that. The minute I saw, I think it was like Ilphonic or Gun Interactive popped up on the trailer and you hear like that little sting of John Carpenter synth score, I was like, hell yes, it's time. Like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, me making this video is kind of like a foregone conclusion. Okay. But, um, I have good reasons. I have good reasons, 10 of them, at least more than 10. Um, but yeah, your average casual gamer is probably not out there, pining for a Killer Clowns game or even a Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. I think that's just the state of the matter. But um, number 9, I sort of go back and forth on this, but I think that smaller lobbies means fuller lobbies. Potentially healthier matchmaking systems. And also like a greater sense of urgency, like FOMO, um, like I said, a lot of times when we were playing Friday, we had this group of people of like a dozen people who regularly played Friday the 13th together all the time. And that's like forever my favorite horror game because, we would, the text chain would go out. And it's like, we're going to get on at this time on this night. And it was usually like Friday, or especially when there was a Friday the 13th in the later years. But early on, it was like every Friday night at, you know, 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. Boom, we're like all hitting the lobby like at the same instant. I think with a smaller lobby, there's more of a sense that like I need to be logging in on time or somebody's gonna take my spot, right? And like um you don't want to like miss out on like these unforgettable sort of memories that you're gonna maybe potentially craft with a game like this. Speaking from experience, um, if you and I guess if you're playing in matchmaking, okay, like maybe this doesn't apply, but like I think smaller lobbies means there's a sense of like get in there, um, be present when you're playing, and like ideally this would mean more teamwork, more working together to escape and survive, and also when Michael is near, higher stakes, right? So um, fewer killers, fewer survivors, victims. Um, the stakes are higher. A death means more. If you somehow defeat Michael, there's not another killer who's going to come clean up, right? There's not. Um, if you kill three, victims, survivors, you don't have like this whole other half of the lobby or whatever. So I think smaller lobbies is going to mean the more people are kind of like engaged in what they're doing, more present in the match, um, and maybe more, excited to be there. Maybe matchmaking will be better. I know that like finding a game in Texas Chainsaw Massacre right now for me personally as a PC player, but with like crossplay enabled, it's really hard to get the matches to fire. Um, which is sad. But again, I think that Texas Chainsaw doesn't have a lot of like, 15, 20-year old, casual gamers who want to play their first horror game, they're not out there seeking out Leatherface, I don't think, for good or ill. Maybe, the next Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie will come out and be a masterpiece and change that. But I think right now it is kind of on that more less niche, less mainstream kind of property. But and then finally, my last point 10, I think this could be the first Asym game to really bring back the Friday audience. A lot of my friend group, when we played that game every night for years and years, or every Friday the 13th, whatever it was at that point in time, we would get back together and we would try out a lot of these other games. We would try things like Texas Chainsaw, we would try Killer Clowns, maybe some of them tried Dead by Daylight, and the vibe was always not quite the same. Um, and a lot of those folks moved on immediately from those other games, and Um, we would say to ourselves, I think even when Friday was new, we would say like, man, I wish they'd make a Halloween game. Like that would be insane if they made a Halloween game like this, because some people like Jason is like their number one guy. And I think for me, I have this really outsized love for Friday the 13th films, and especially like six and Jason Goes to Hell and part two, and even like the reboot from '09. I love that movie. I think I love those movies because of the game. I grew up watching like Scream and Halloween and like all these other, The Faculty and things like that, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Those were kind of like my gateway drugs into being a horror fan, a lifelong fan of horror. But I didn't really grow up on Jason. It was really the game that made me like go back and watch every single one of those movies, many, many times. And um, I think if you want to bring back that specific audience, and if you're Ilphonic and Gun Media, you want to bring back that audience. Friday was their big success story. Um, you want to make a game that feels like Friday did and is slightly better, slightly more polished, crossplay, make the crossplay experience really streamlined. Killer Clowns' crossplay was kind of rough, especially like at launch. It was like, um, some of us were playing on PC and wanting to play on PC with our Xbox buddies who had, we played Friday with for years and years. And like we just couldn't get crossplay to work for everybody. We like had to buy a second copy of the game on Xbox or okay, I didn't buy the PC copy because I was reviewing it or something. I only bought like one copy um, technically because I had a review code, but just in the interest of full disclosure, I guess, and being accurate. But it was like I had to have a second copy of the game, so I had to like, spend $40 or whatever on the Killer Clowns for Xbox, like immediately, and play on console, and and get Xbox Live Gold or Game Pass or whatever it was, in the moment because it was like we couldn't get crossplay to work. So um, Friday the 13th was not a perfect game, but a lot of us would say like it was the most fun we ever had with a multiplayer horror game, playing with a group of regulars or, playing it online with strangers, all of the above. I've rarely had as much fun. There were exceptions. There are like Destiny and Halo and Minecraft memories. Games like that certainly have been really kind of these transcendent moments of online multiplayer. Having fun with your dipshit friends. But Friday the 13th, the game was kind of like the pinnacle of that in a lot of ways, and I think that you know Mikey Myers, he might be just the guy to bring back some of that magic. And so, yeah, I get the hesitations. Okay, I get that people are worried that the game could have some issues. It's kind of like, oh, they abandoned Friday the 13th and they stopped working on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, I get those concerns, and like obviously like my heart is forever broken that Friday the 13th is, gone, for effectively, dead in the ground. Like, Jason in part five, he ain't coming. Okay. Like, um, but, I think that a situation more like Texas or whatever, a lot of people see that as like the worst case scenario. And I don't even think that that's fair, where you don't want to have all these like paid cosmetics in the store, but you also want the game to like be forever supported with like an ongoing live roadmap and like more maps and more modes and more characters and more cosmetics forever and ever ad infinitum. Like that sounds good, but like the games industry is in a really rough place right now, and like you need to care about workers and sustainable practices for these studios so that they don't have to like lay off their staff again and again and rely on like overly exploitative like contract labor and things like that. Like, if you love these kinds of games, you want to see some of them succeed, and like um by all means, like, give your feedback, right? Um, and I would say don't root for these things to fail. Like, damn, give honest, direct feedback to these studios and say, here are the things we don't want in our games, and then maybe they meet you somewhere halfway. But I've talked to a lot of game developers over the last, what, 13 years or whatever, interviewed a lot of them. And, I feel like nobody gets into the business of making video games because they want to make bad video games that make players angry. Never. That's not what they want to do. They want to make a game that people love and embrace, like Friday the 13th, like Dead by Daylight, like Resident Evil, like Five Nights at Freddy's, like they want that to happen and for it to feel good, for the players to feel like they spent X number of dollars and got so much more in return. And I mean, I know that, you know, um, no amount of money, no amount of money would have justified the amount of fun that I had with Friday the 13th. But yeah, I mean, you have to be realistic. You have to launch with like a $40 is a lot of money for a game for some people these days. Like, I know my spending ability when I'm browsing the Steam shop for a new game to play on stream or whatever. Like, it's really rough right now. People don't have money to spend in a lot of cases. So um, money doesn't go very far. And if you're gonna monetize the game with paid stuff, then maybe you think about like more of a free to play sort of model. But you know um I think that this has potential to be what Friday couldn't, because of the Friday the 13th being, the sort of total legal clusterfuck that it has been as a franchise, as a media property for basically many years now, since what, like 2009 was that's a long time to not have a new movie in a series that everyone knows. A lot of people really love and enjoy. Like, it would be such a slam dunk for somebody like, Jason Blum or LeBron James or Jordan Peele or whoever the hell wanted to make a Friday the 13th slasher at a low budget, put it in movie theaters and have people flock by the, millions. And, it would just be such an obvious win. And for so long, it hasn't happened because of, just uh, competing lawsuits back and forth, and just sort of the courts and lawyers stopping, the use of those properties for so long, or sort of slivers of the properties, or certain characters or titles, or branding. So, I look forward to seeing more of Halloween the game. It's probably my most anticipated game right now, up there with 007 First Light, another cool looking licensed game that we haven't seen a James Bond game in a long time. So similar thing where I'm just like excited to get some time in that world again. God, when was the last time there was a Halloween video game? Like the 80s, like, so it's cool. Well, I mean, I did play Retro Realms, and I that 2D pixel art, Michael Myers sort of beat 'em up style game. Very challenging, very cute, very charming, very fun, really well made. Didn't want to dismiss that, but this new Ilphonic game looks like it'll really deliver what I want out of like a sort of Friday style Asym Halloween game, and we'll find out. We'll find out soon. But yeah, um, be clear with what you want out of this game. Let the devs know. Be kind to them. And I'm excited to play it. So maybe we'll see you in Haddonfield later this year. So thanks so much. Have a good one, guys.